Underway. Welcome everyone to Contemporary Issues class for a fun topic today that I don't think we have ever tackled. Have we, Ron? Ever tackled conspiracy theories?
Not specifically.
I don't think so, but I want to thank my friend Steve O'Neill for suggesting this topic a couple of weeks ago. He specifically, I believe, mentioned vaccines, but then I got to thinking, there are so many others, and they have been so prevalent, especially stolen election conspiracy theories in the last few years, that it's a great time for us to talk about that. Ann, go ahead.
Well, I just, a question.
Yes.
Are you going to prove that all of these are true?
True or false? We're going to discuss that today. We are, but before we get there, I want to do our usual announcements. Welcome any first timers. I want to welcome Ian and his wife. Yes, nice to have you. Debbie, nice to have Libby. Okay, nice to have you here today too. And our Zoomers, we have, looks like 5 or 8 Zoomers maybe. Welcome to you. Please mute yourself on the lower left corner of your screen when you're not talking so we can keep the background noise down. But we hope you will weigh in and with your opinions and questions today. And we are recording this for future playback on YouTube. Folks like to see this if they can't be here today in person. And yes, Gene.
Yes, I'm sure probably there's some members here in the class who watch this, but on Wednesday evenings at 8 o'clock, the series called The History of Future. Some of you, I'm sure, have watched this. It's
Oxymoron.
PBS, Channel 6, right? Anyway, the one last week was The Future of Humanity.
Oh,
And they
good.
have authorities, a wide range, it sounds like St. Andrews, wide range of authorities,
Good.
viewpoints, and very stimulating. Only one
Good.
every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, Channel 6.
Great. Okay. Yeah, let our folks come in. We've got chairs over there. We can bring more over here. I wish we charged admission now that so many have shown up. Okay. Also, one last announcement too. Since we will be talking about political issues today, we will, our usual disclaimer that we try not to be partisan in this class. We try to be equal opportunity offenders and appraisers. And praising people on both sides because there is good and bad on both sides. But we will be talking about what experts say about Mr. Trump helping to promote conspiracy theories more in the last 10 years than have been perhaps in the history of this country because of some of his comments and positions on issues. So I hope we don't offend from that perspective, and we'll try and be objective about that. But that is part of what the research shows today about conspiracy theories and why they are more popular than ever. Okay, with that, we always talk about things that are in the news for just a minute at the beginning here. And I wanted to get your opinion on the student protest against Gaza today, because it's a fascinating topic. What do the kids want? Why is it spreading across the country to every campus, including the Auraria campus here locally? And I want to ask Professor Peter, one of our class members who teaches at DU, why are the kids doing this and what do you think, Peter?
Oh, you're nice to ask. I'm actually retired from DU and now I'm affiliate faculty member pro bono, which means voluntary. Affiliate faculty member at Regis University, which is my privilege to be there now in that position. I hope that there can be balance in the protests. I support protests, peaceful protests. I hope the Israeli positions can be presented, the Jewish positions can be presented, the Palestinian positions can be presented. And I hope in those protests there can be balance. I hope all sides can have a chance to share and not get at each other.
Yes. It's sad that the Jewish kids are being criticized and attacked in some cases, not representing the protesters, not representing the concerns of both sides.
We need balance. Thank you, Steve, for asking.
Balance.
Well,
Okay.
as I understand, the kids that are protesting do not want their tuition dollars to go to killing. So they're asking for divestment.
Yes. And they also, I think, are looking for publicity to help put pressure on the US government to stop supporting Israel in the Gaza overreaction. Yeah. Anybody else? Suzie?
So I didn't understand, so if they didn't want the universities to do anything with the Israeli government, but what are they doing to the colleges to support the Israeli government?
Colleges
I don't
have,
understand that.
in their budgets and investments, they invest in companies that support Israel and other ways, I think, don't they, have investments?
Companies that support Israel,
That's right, too.
so it
Yeah,
would be.
yeah, that's right, Susan. Alan?
One point that I picked up on the evening news was, one campus is are asking for student IDs, and so that brought up the question of outside instigators. And those campuses that have turned violent, I'm wondering, how many, if outside instigators are in that group,
Coming in and doing that, yeah.
propagating violence and throwing that random chair out, at the police and whatever,
Appears to be a problem also.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Okay, Gene, we're gonna wrap this up.
The irony too is we got thousands of people protesting in Tel Aviv against Netanyahu.
Yeah,
And so some of the protesters are Jewish students themselves. So it's a mixed bag. It's a very mixed bag.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Okay, let's talk about conspiracy theories. I've handed out a couple of handouts here, and I'll try to post these on Zoom also for us, but one of them is categories of conspiracy theories. And these are some of the most popular, not only recently, but stretching back into history. And we'll talk about a little bit about each of these. Under political and government, there's of course the 2020 election stolen conspiracy theory. JFK was killed by government actors. US government is hiding space alien bodies, and evidence has always been a popular one. And airplane chemical trails are a government conspiracy of the government putting chemicals into airplanes and then spreading it by the trails that come behind for some reason. We'll talk about that. Individuals, Trump conspired with the Russians, and then Biden receives payments from his family members who sell his political influence. He receives direct payments, apparently. The Clintons killed many political opponents. And one of my favorites, Oprah Winfrey's Girls' School in Africa is the source for human trafficking of girls into the world trafficking culture. Under medical, vaccines cause autism and the evidence is secret. US government covered up the real source of the COVID virus. Others, denials, major events in history that were staged, including the moon landing, Sandy Hook school shooting, and the Holocaust. People believe that those were staged by different groups. And finally, just on the religious side, Jesus' body was stolen by his followers in a conspiracy, even though they were in hiding. Apparently, the conspiracy is that they found their courage, got together, went and stole that body, and then did something with it for some purpose. And then finally, Jesus' wife, Mary Magdalene, went to France and had his child there. And there are people there to this day who claim to be descended from Mary Magdalene and Jesus. They're called like the Moravians or something like that. This was in the book, what was it called, folks? Called what, Norley?
Oh, sorry. It was Dan Brown. Can't remember the title.
Da Vinci Code. That's right. The Da Vinci Code about 10 years ago. Yeah. And finally, Jews and Catholics each have secret plans to take over the world for their own purposes also. So we will get into a little bit of all And I want to mention too, I know we have folks in this room who believe some of these things to a more or less degree because I've already talked to them this morning. And I hope that we will be considerate of their views if they would like to speak up and tell their views on these things. But let me, as we get started, let me read just a few things to you about what a definition of conspiracy theories, times when conspiracy theories have proven true and therefore were no longer called a theory, and why we're talking about them. So let me just do a little dialoguing here from some different websites, and so it must be true if I got it off the internet. These are from Wikipedia and science websites, most particularly. The Oxford Dictionary defines conspiracy theory as a theory that an event occurs as a result of a conspiracy between interested parties, a belief that some covert or influential agency, usually, has been responsible for an unexplained event. Conspiracy theory is usually believed to have originated from a powerful or sinister group, often political in motivation, when more logical explanations are most probable. A conspiracy theory is based usually on an emotional conviction and insufficient evidence for the rest of society. Opposition to the mainstream consensus is key to conspiracy theories. They usually are in opposition to whatever the mainstream societal consensus is about an issue. They're designed to resist falsification by showing of evidence and the lack of evidence. So that's a key part of them. When conspiracy theories turn out to be true in the past, can anybody mention any that come to mind? I know it's not quickly done. Well, one is the Watergate issue. When that was first proposed to the Washington Post as people saying you should investigate this group of men doing burglaries and dirty tricks from the White House, trying to get Richard Nixon elected. They thought this was a ridiculous, sounded like conspiracy theory that wouldn't be true, even though governments sometimes hide things. But of course, we know as the reporters started looking into that, little by little, they found out it was true. So there are times in history when conspiracy theories have proven true. Conspiracy theories, why we're talking about them. Once limited to fringe audiences, they have become more commonplace due to mass media, to the internet in particular, with unregulated posts and YouTube videos that more and more people see. And since 2015, when President Trump began talking about believing not the government and scientists, but more, for example, Putin, with the time that he said that Putin, Trump believed that Putin said he did not interfere in US elections, and Trump said, I believe that he's telling me the truth and I do not believe the US Intelligence Committee. That was one of the turning points, they say, that his followers began to believe more that the government lies to us, the intelligence agencies, and that it's perfectly reasonable to doubt the word of the government. But even before Trump, a 2013 study by the University of Chicago said that 37% of Americans believe the Food and Drug Administration deliberately suppressed natural cures due to the influence from the pharmaceutical lobby. Sounds like something that could be true, because the pharmaceutical lobby wants to stop anything that would actually cut into their profits. But there's been no preponderance of evidence to show that the FDA has suppressed any actual natural cures. A 2016 study found that 10% of Americans think the chemical trail airplane conspiracy theory is completely true, 20 to 30% think it is somewhat true.
What is that?
Okay, that one is, that one is the theory that, okay, you see the airliners go across the sky and there are the white trails behind them. Contrails, they're called also, or chemical trails. This is the theory that the government is, for some reason, having airlines put chemicals in there and then spreading it across the country to do nefarious things. And I'm not sure what the exact
Solar
intention
radiation
in
management.
solar radiation management. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay,
Dim the sun.
to dim the sun, to cut down
reduce
on
global warming.
reduced global warming. Thank you. Okay,
This is a new one.
okay, could be.
NPR this morning.
The science YouTubes that I have watched have said that they have researched this. Many researchers have researched this and found that no evidence that the government is putting any chemicals into it. What it actually is the hot exhaust from the airplanes when it hits the 40-degree below temperature at that altitude of 30,000 feet turns into water vapor. And so the water vapor then spreads out across the sky. And takes a while before it evaporates
Ice crystals.
into ice crystals, yes. So what do you think of that one? Let me just throw that one out.
We don't need to be concerned because the state of Tennessee has now outlawed vapor trails.
Okay,
Over Tennessee, you're not allowed to. do
is that really true or are you teasing?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
It just was done within the last
I
year.
did not know that. Okay.
Because they're legislatures. This is one of the things, you know, we think legislatures know all, they're omniscient and stuff, and they really don't understand what they're doing.
The science.
They don't understand the representation.
I did read one story that said that with global warming, there have been studies to see if there's anything airplanes can actually do, release in the atmosphere that would help global warming. But the scientists say that there's no consensus yet on whether that would be effective. And so they've not actually moved forward with that.
That study's 10 years down the road.
10 years down the road. Okay.
It'd be expensive too.
Okay. Conspiracy theories, how they cause harm. They are strongly believed by perpetrators, especially of terrorist attacks, including Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma bomber, was one, as well as some in Europe and others that have acted on their conspiracy theory beliefs. The government of South Africa actually prevented food from being delivered to help its starving people in Zambia because of a conspiracy theory about genetically modified foods. It was concerned that genetically modified foods are dangerous. And so the government actually rejected food at a time when 3 million people were suffering during 2018. But there was no evidence, not enough evidence, most scientists feel, for genetically modified foods doing damage to people's health. Conspiracy theories are also a significant obstacle to improvements in public health, with the biggest issue being vaccines. And of course, that came through during the pandemic when many people decided that the government was not giving the truthful information about the fast development of the COVID vaccines. They were not safe and that they should not be used. And I found that Vicki and I have friends in Arkansas who are a man and wife veterinary couple, who both have veterinary degrees. They do not believe in vaccines of any type for their 5 kids.
Oh.
And
About the animals.
Yeah, what about the animals?
I think they do give vaccines to yeah, because they are better researched. And their theory is the animal vaccines are better, slower developed and more safe than the human vaccines. But my friends, there also are firm Trump supporters. And so that was a factor that played into that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you think about vaccines? Do any of you have concerns about vaccines also that you would be willing to share? we're not going to criticize you. Yes,
No, prior to the pandemic, people for religious reasons would avoid getting their children vaccinated. So that was way before. The pandemic.
okay.
You know, if anybody's actually caught one of these diseases, back in the day, I remember my kids having chicken pox and measles. I had measles. If there had been a vaccine to prevent those,
Mhm.
would have done it really fast because having measles is awful. And I remember dealing with small children and chicken pox. Yeah. MMR is a miracle vaccination, so.
Okay,
I will raise my hand and volunteer. As a child, when I was vaccinated for smallpox, the scratch thing,
Yeah.
I caught smallpox and I missed a month of school.
okay.
Such a
Okay.
deal. Yeah.
But as we read about vaccines and their development and what the experts say, most of them seem to say vaccines are overall safe for the general population and necessary. But there is a small percentage of people who are gonna get sick from that, but it is worth the risk of taking the vaccine. And if you don't, you're contributing to the possible resurgence of those diseases because
They're contagious.
because they're contagious, and if not enough people get vaccinated, they will reemerge. I believe that's,
And they have reemerged, with measles now becoming quite common in parts of this country and elsewhere in the world, for one example. And I guess I worry more about the people that are not vaccinated, infecting grandchildren and others, and not being conscious of that, sending their kids to school with a disease which then spreads through the school.
good point, Linda, okay.
When I was raising my kids, I remember thinking, I didn't question, but that can be a problem too. I didn't question the fact that the doctor said they need this, and this. And I think that later generations, like my kids who were vaccinated, they have started questioning, well, do they really need to have that? So it's the difference of whether or not, we just take it for fact and just do it. And I just think their generation and generations beyond that question that more. And I guess maybe that's the type of generation they are. They question things more, but
And even as a church, we encourage questioning.
right.
Think for yourself, do doubt. Yes, Peter.
I'm concerned, as I'm sure many people are, when someone who has visibility in one field, like Aaron Rodgers in pro football, speaks out and is concerned about vaccinations or is an anti-vaxxer and he knows nothing about science, where I'm concerned, as I'm sure many are, that a person with a big podium
Yeah.
is listened to, even if he doesn't know what in the heck he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Bill, and then I want to ask Steve and Rebecca about their daughter, who is a doctor and has a strong opinion on this too. I want to get to that too, but Bill, go ahead first.
Yeah, so I guess with these vaccines, the one fear is what are the consequences of getting a vaccine? And the one you pointed out was autism. Apparently it's on the rise, and I don't know the science, but what's behind it?
Mhm.
And it is more prevalent today than it was, 50 or 100 years ago. But again, it's just one of these things that, if you're looking at vaccines, I have no problem getting a vaccine. We probably all have a little mark on here from a polio vaccine. But, that's the one thing that comes up, is what's the fear of the doctor?
Yes. Yes. And science changes. Maybe they'll find out eventually that some vaccines do cause autism or something, but currently there's not enough evidence they say, to warrant resisting taking vaccines. Okay, Steve.
Okay, so there's a couple things that I want to go through. One is that each generation has got to learn on their own. So one of the things that is not happening, which is what we're talking to, is that there has not been large bad pandemics. Okay, it's like the 1918. People forget that the 1918 pandemic killed more people than people died from the First World War.
Correct.
Okay, so people forget that. They just happen to forget these things about what else is going on. So that's the first thing that goes along with this. The second thing is that what my daughter is about is in vaccination, which was alluded to by what the lady said on the video, is the population, the herd has to be vaccinated enough. And if the herd is not vaccinated enough, there will be an outbreak. And what is happening is what she has said is my daughter is an emergency doctor, okay? And if you can envision, she was on the front lines then of what happened with COVID. And she didn't understand about what was happening in COVID. That could be a whole other conversation anyway. The deal with it is what she's deeply concerned about is there's large pockets of population, specifically in Portland, Oregon, where there's a large number of people that are not vaccinated. And what she actually believes is that there will be something really catastrophic happen, such as that hundreds of children will end up with polio. Okay, and then it will be, once again, because it will swing, the pendulum will swing. My grandmother used to talk about this, that, you know, the pendulum swings for what else that happens then. After we have a really bad pandemic, people, oh, gee, maybe we should start believing in science again, or thinking about science, or giving credibility to science for what there is in the areas in which things are happening. So my daughter is deeply concerned that there's going to be a really bad outbreak.
Bird flu.
Bird flu too,
Yeah, it's
okay?
affecting cattle now.
And get into our milk. That was on the news.
Okay,
I think fear is a motivator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
good point, Joy, okay? And what do you think is the answer to that?
Education.
Education, okay.
But we're not supposed to worry.
I was,
Sorry.
that was the message of the sermon today. Do not
But
worry.
he also said stress is inevitable, but stressing out is optional.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go.
Right. Yes, Jane, go ahead.
Well, we had our vaccines for COVID, all of them. But then we came home from a cruise, sicker than a dog, and both of us had the COVID. And so, you know,
Not as
we
bad.
still got, but
Really,
I'm guessing is that
Not as bad.
if nothing else, as sick as we were.
And some people will look at that and say, well, then why should I even get a vaccine
No,
if I'm gonna get sick anyway? But the answer to that is it could have saved your life
Exactly.
because you got a less
yeah,
serious case.
yeah, and I think we got the
Yes.
next one after that.
Yes, okay.
I don't think a lot of people realize, and I think everybody in here probably does, that when you get the flu vaccine, you're getting 2 or 3 or 4 of the dominant variants that they have projected will be
Right.
important in that year.
Yeah.
But there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of those flu viruses.
Okay,
Yeah.
good segue into our next section. Why do people believe conspiracy theories? First, they often believe because conspiracy theories can explain what institutions often cannot. The theories appear to make sense out of a world that is otherwise confusing and presents issues that are complicated and not easy to understand. And the theories often do this in an appealing way. They also appeal to the forces of light versus the forces of dark. They trace all evil often back to a single source, and that's easy to understand and appealing to believe in. Third, they often present what seems like secret knowledge that is unappreciated or unknown by others and makes the believer feel empowered that they have a secret knowledge that others don't. The masses are seen, the mass of other people are often seen as the brainwashed herd who doesn't really understand with the truth of this issue. And so conspiracy believers are often deceiving themselves. And at the base of their belief is often a lack of ability to make decisions based on evidence and critical thinking. These folks often have difficulty thinking through situations and coming to an objective conclusion. These believers want to believe in these theories for some emotional reason that satisfies their personality. That it does not help to try to reason and show them evidence when they are basing their decisions on emotional reasons. Conspiracy theories are often based on things like one person's eyewitness testimony or belief. Who best resist conspiracy theories? People who feel empowered and are trained in analytical thinking. Most consistently demonstrated characteristics of people who believe in conspiracy theories are those who feel alienated and those who have deep-seated distrust in government or science. A primary defense against conspiracy theories is to maintain an open society where there is a belief in science and government sources that appear to be credible, as well as teaching young people how to think critically and understand the importance of evidence-based decision making. What do you think about that, Mason?
See, I think, one thing, and you may have mentioned this, is that these can't really be disproven, although they're absurd. But I remember even much of my younger day, I heard this theory about Lyndon Johnson was responsible for the assassination of JFK because he wanted to become president. He didn't like JFK in the first place. And as we all know, he was a one-term president and chose not to run again for re-election, but you just can't argue with these folks. It's
Right.
and you can't disprove it. There are
Right.
CIA.
Right. That also leads to a good point that Steve O'Neill and I wanted to mention too, that conspiracy theories are often turned into propaganda for political and personal gain.
No.
They are.
Say it, so.
And the most obvious recent example of that is the stolen election of 2020, when most experts believe there was not enough evidence to believe that there was widespread election interference. There were individual pockets where there were questions on legal ballots, but there was nothing close to enough or anything of a democratic conspiracy from state to state that made any difference in elections or races. And that was proven, they say, by the 64 court cases that Trump filed. And none of those judges in those 64 cases found any evidence worthy of ruling in Trump's favor. So that's an important part. Steve-O.
Okay, so I'm going to continue on with a couple of other things that I just want to paint the picture about this so you understand about what we're dealing with. 62% of Republicans believe that the election was stolen. 62% of the Republicans, okay, that's the last poll. So just think about what that is. Now, when you go to a bigger picture, yeah, there may be places where we have issues of a particular area may have problems with voting, agreed. But it is not, I'm going to state it a different way than the way Steve said it, is that it's not statistically based enough for them to go ahead and say that it was enough to overthrow the election. In other words, it would be like 0.1% of whatever it was. It's still a small problem, rather than it being something that was larger. So there is a portion of it that can be believed about that, yes, that there was some invalid voting that just happened in the last presidential election. But what is it about? Why is it that people believe that 62% that of them believe that the election was stolen? So just sit with that one.
Okay. Gene.
Oh, okay.
It's a wonderful time as far as creativity and fantasy. One of the great strengths that Donald Trump had, he's a great marketer. Our granddaughter, who was in town this past week, is a film distributor. She has to market for Lionsgate and Stars, and she was in town doing such here in Denver this past week. What's hot in various parts of the country and the films that are really being streamed and what the future, it's all about money and and the film business. And that's one barometer of the American psyche, one barometer. Fantasy films that stream are getting what Pastor Mark was preaching about this morning. When there are some margins between is it true, is it not true? This is right for fantasy and for germinating such fantasy. You can make money out of this and you can utilize it, and it is being used as a coping mechanism for many people as a way of dealing with all these uncertainties. So it's really a right time for fantasy. If you're in fantasy business, whether it be Disneyland or any kind of fantasy, to get you away from all the so-called chaos and projected evils of the day that we know all so well.
Good point, good point. Ron and then Ian.
We're recognizing the power of the confirmation bias, particularly dealing with politics, religion, and romance. Probably everybody can remember in their life, some person is infatuated with somebody of the opposite sex or the same sex. And sometimes their friends will tell them, you really don't want to get involved with this just released felon who's, you know, yeah. Judy, you're making a terrible mistake, but it's like that song, hopelessly devoted to you. From the movie Grease. And we see it so much in politics and religion. Religion, you know, look at people that are raised in a certain faith. Hourly, daily, for 20 years, they're told this is the truth. To come out of that is incredibly difficult. No matter how much factual evidence you can pile up, that confirmation bias is so powerful. And I'm surprised in the last 5 years how much I've seen the strengthening of it. And people with PhDs and tremendous education, yet their critical thinking and willingness to throw aside the confirmation bias is so lacking in many cases.
Ian.
If conspiracy theories are maybe a manifestation of unmet needs, and we are experiencing a breakdown of our institutions and trust in them, and it makes me wonder, what are we called to do as a community, as a church, if we truly believe that all are welcome, no matter what you believe? Is this a home for people who might happen to believe in a conspiracy theorist? Are we to make it a welcoming place for everyone, no matter what they believe? For myself, I have to catch myself because I start to dismiss people as wacky or uneducated or not putting in the effort to really inform themselves. But that's a judgment on my part. And whether they are or not probably shouldn't matter. If I'm called by Jesus to love one another, we can leave the judging to God and make this a place where all are really welcome.
Good point, thank you. Reminds me of the sermon last week on Christian nationalism. I thought Mark did a good job of defining that issue without condemning people who are Christian nationalist. And that's a tough balance to try and do.
What my sister said was,
What?
he avoided labels, but called out the behaviors.
Right, yeah, right, exactly.
Okay,
That's what my sister said. She's a doctor.
okay. Ian, can I ask you, you're a retired principal, elementary schools. Are kids taught analytical thinking in any level of education today?
We try.
Uh-huh.
That's the goal, I think, with progressive education, is that it's not just about memorization and knowledge. Although some would say in order to reason, you have to have a knowledge base. So it's really not one or the other, it's both, I would say. But I know that critical thinking is generally highly valued part of curriculum. How you actually do that is challenging because all the teachers grew up being taught what to think, not how to think. And so it becomes an intergenerational cycle that's challenging to break.
Let me ask Eric, our high school teacher here of biology, what do high school kids think? Are kids drawn to conspiracy theories at high school age?
Kids, for the most part, parrot what their parents have think or have taught them. I've noticed that. But at the middle and high school level, memorization is really, really looked down upon. It's just, unless you're in theater and memorizing lines, or maybe you have one teacher that wants you, like for me, I had to memorize the valence numbers for the periodic table. You know, when I was. Was that useful for me today? No, not as much as learning how to think. And so it depends on the high school and it depends on the teacher. But I think science teachers, perhaps history teachers as well, but definitely science teachers, we've been moving, at least for the last 10 or 15 years, we've been moving towards evaluating the evidence. And trying to assess, where did this information come from? What's the source? And so whenever we teach students about the scientific method, before they can come to a conclusion, they need to evaluate the evidence. You know, is this good evidence? Is it based on is it based on the experiments? But the scientific method isn't designed to discover new truth, it's to confirm the facts that we've already established and try to prove them wrong. You know, and so again, it depends on the teacher and the science department. But I think other disciplines do it as well, but I know science does it.
Okay. Steve-O, do you have any other
No.
topics? Okay, okay. I want to ask if folks have any close friends, relatives that are believers in conspiracy theories, what we consider to be false conspiracy theories. And if you've dealt with them, as Vicky and I have, with 3 or 4 friends, including one who says he believes that Oprah Winfrey School in Africa really is grooming and putting girls into the human trafficking culture. And I said, why do you believe that? He said, there's a YouTube video that explains it. I said, don't you think people put YouTube videos out there so they can get clicks on the most salacious things and make money that way? And he said, I don't know about that. I just think Oprah is doing this and she should stop doing that. So Alan, go ahead.
Well, I have a personal friend of 30-something years who analytically, well, he's an aeronautical engineer. He's designed the sensors on the space shuttle. He switched to the medical device industry. And during COVID, he started corresponding with me and asked me questions about whether or not I was a believer in vaccinations. And I said, yes, I am. And he would argue with me. And to my surprise, being from the analytical mindset, I was very surprised and that he was anti-vaccine. And we went back and forth email discussing our views, and he sent me one cartoon. It was a cartoon of a guy with 6 arms. Meaning that he got vaccinated.
Yes.
And look what happened. He
Sure.
grew 6 arms. So I responded to him. I said, was this before he got vaccinated? And he didn't respond.
Yes, okay. Gene, go ahead.
Yeah, as psychologist, I'm getting back to your unmet needs. There's a certain amount of projection and reaction formation taking place on these fantasies. Being projected out. Problems that are not now being resolved within oneself is being projected out there. So I think we're seeing a certain amount of that too, in some of the fantasy drama that we're all involved with today.
Oh, one last comment. I found out that he just accepted a job as like when Trump was president, as a bodyguard with Trump.
A bodyguard? Okay. Very good.
And that was the key thing that I was.
Okay. I want to ask our Zoomers in just a minute if they'd like to comment or question. But first, I want to read you something, just 5 types of conspiracy theories that have been categorized by a psychologist. The first type is called the enemy outside, and it's based on actions against the community that come from an enemy outside is a popular conspiracy theory origin. Another one's the enemy within, that there are conspirators lurking inside the nation, like a deep state we've heard about, that are conspiring against either our leaders or the people themselves. The enemy above involves powerful people, often in companies or billionaires, manipulating events for their own gain to those of us below. The fourth is called the enemy below, features the lower classes working to overturn the middle and upper classes for their own purposes. And finally, benevolent conspiracies are angelic spiritual forces that work behind the scenes to improve or help people. That's a different twist on it too, seen as a conspiracy theory by some. Okay, I want to give our Zoomers a chance to weigh in so they don't feel like they're interrupting us. Anybody with a question or comment? Do you have any conspiracy theory relatives or friends that you're dealing with? Linda, how about you as an attorney? Have you run into this in your profession?
Well, I've been retired since before Trump came on, so no. Other than working with the legislature, even at that time, there were those who had certain theories about the political system. Yes, I do have friends who thoroughly believe that vaccinations are not important and they cause disease. Of course, they don't have kids that have autism, but you know, that is as it will be. I find it difficult to, I guess, talk to some of those folks because the facts are not an important issue to them. So that's all I.
They're believing for either an emotional reason or a reason to advance their own political agenda. Conspiracy theories that the researchers say are often accepted because, to some people, because it helps my political party. And so I don't want to do anything to discount something that would hurt my political party's chances of success.
Norm and I watched a movie called The Contender last night. I don't know if others have seen it, but the premise is putting from the national level, the suggestion that something was true against your opponent that's running for election. And the driving force was not the truth or veracity. It was a salacious thing that would get publication. And whether or not it was true, they didn't care. They just wanted in the movie to get this information out there to dampen the chances that that opponent would get votes. It sounds like fiction.
Sounds like National Enquirer.
Putting out some negative issue about your opponent just to get
Yeah,
attention on
and
that.
that's what Trump said when he wanted the Ukraine story out about the ambassador that was coming into Ukraine.
Well, Jefferson called Adams during the Adams reelection campaign, he called him a monarchist. No evidence for it, but it took a lot of votes away from Adams.
If I could, Eleanor's, I'm sorry, Norley. This along the lines that we've been discussing, I think the thing that's really pretty typical is similar to Facebook. You can't disabuse someone of their opinion about a particular conspiracy theory. And I just find that really frustrating. I mean, and along the lines we've been talking about, facts don't matter. It's really something that's very emotional. I'd love to know if there's a way to do it, but I don't know if you can.
Good question. Vicky.
I think the thing that we have found with our friends is, they're pretty much isolationists. Or they only hang with people that believe the way they believe. So they can kind of stir each other up and everything, you know, and in response to, how are we supposed to act as a church? I think that had it not been, I didn't have conspiracy theories, but I definitely had some fundamental beliefs that, I now don't believe anymore. But had it not been for, a loving and accepting, group of people around me, I would not have been able to move through that time, without a lot of pain and agony, you know, and I might not have done it either. So I'm thinking that as a church, you know, we just have to accept people like that for where they are when they come. And then just love them through it, you know, and listen, a lot of listening, you know, and then, but I just know that had I not had a group of accepting and loving people around me, I might not be where I'm at today, for which I'm very thankful for. So I think as a church, that's what we have to do. We have to include and be accepting and loving, you know?
Okay, I'm gonna just go right to this, Vicky. Everybody in this room thinks like we do.
Well, but do you know
I'll
that?
go with my flow with this, okay? I'll go with my flow with this, but everybody thinks that this is all just really, you know, that we're all open and we're all willing and everything else like that. And then we take a look at the way that the church has been hijacked. Okay, right now for political gain of certain parties and stuff like that. And then we take a look at how much that this church right now today is doing nothing to counteract that. Okay, so basically, we are a bunch of people that really believe that we need to change something. We're not doing anything about it. Okay, and this is probably one of the biggest issues right now that I am dealing with at a spiritual level and an actual level right now today is that somebody else has hijacked Christianity, portraying a thing about Christianity that's not true for me at all. But yet I don't see a way for us to counteract it effectively.
But Mark called it out last week.
Sure. But we're not taking any action on it. That's what I'm saying.
What kind of action
Yeah,
would you suggest?
That's what I'm saying. What kind of action would it, for me, it looks like that, why isn't the Methodist Church taking this? Okay, why aren't we saying that, no, this is not, we are not the evangelicals, we have a different viewpoint about what else that there is. Why isn't it we as 27,000 different churches taking this on and saying, nope, we don't agree with this.
Here. Okay.
Okay, and it's like, I'm just kind of, it's very disjunct for me to see about with what we believe on a spiritual basis.
But isn't there a way to get involved with that through some of the conferences? Like the one that's gonna be in Wyoming and then the global one? I understand at Sisters, it was shared that we can get more involved with that. And as a member of the church, you would be able to put your vote in. Am I wrong? I mean, that's what Allison was sharing with me. She sent me the information. So my point is, would you be able to get involved at that level and put your vote in as to how the direction of the church? Is that?
Right, I'd like to see about how we could do that, yes.
Okay.
Collectively, yes.
Talk to
That would be
Amy.
good.
Yeah, I know Steve is expressing a feeling by many people that the progressive churches as a whole should be higher visibility with greater message to counteract the negatives of the conservative churches that have become the narrative for Christianity over the last 50 years and are driving many people away. So I tried to summarize it there.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly.
So Steve,
Not just music, not just our church, but
Church to get them back.
so in response to what I just said, to be complacent and loving and accepting is not enough, is what you're saying, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I
Right.
meant. That's what I meant.
Right, because right now I don't see anything that's being enabled then to have an alternative discussion.
Right, yeah.
doing that's important, but it doesn't raise the visibility of our message.
No, that's true, because I personally went through that journey on my own.
Yes.
And thanks to him, you know, a lot, and the churches that we became involved in, you know. But I do see what you're saying, you know, collectively, it's not happening. But I personally went through that journey, you know, so yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Mason.
kind of echoing what Vicky says, I agree with Steve O'Neill 100% about, when he says the church has been hijacked. Yes, the church as a whole has been hijacked, and we can do what we want to at conference and all like that, but somehow we need to get a message out to, and I think this is what I got from what Steve was saying to everyone, you know, like, here's our position, here's the alternative, and here's why we believe what we do. Because if you look at TV evangelist, if you look at a lot of evangelical churches around, there's a huge conservative, really conservative movement and the church as a whole nowadays. So to his point, I think, you know, we could do a lot better of getting the message, you know, not only within the Methodist church, but outside.
Steve, in either June or July, this is what Amy told us on Wednesday, that they are having the regional conference for this area, and they need lay people to be up there to put their votes in. It's half clergy and half lay people, but they never have enough lay people involved.
Yeah.
So if you are truly interested in getting involved with this,
Okay.
this was from Amy.
I'll contact you.
So I would ask her.
Good.
Yeah.
And this is a discussion a lot of us have had. What does the future of the church look like? How do the progressives take that message to a big audience, a bigger level? Television, social media, what are the marketing formats we should be using, and what message should we be giving to the young people that could draw them back and make it, appealing to them? Mhm. Any more thought? We've got just 3 minutes left. Any more thoughts? How did,
Think
go
of
ahead, Sharon.
Drawing more people into your church. I think the Zoom platform has been wonderful. Because you hear
Yes.
about the number of people who are watching that. But you don't know where they are. You don't know how to help, how they can help you. There's no interaction.
Mhm.
But it includes a lot
Yeah.
of people,
Yeah.
which is great. So I'm not
It does.
complaining. It's just we don't see how they interact with us.
I think now we have more on Zoom than we do in the pews on a Sunday morning.
That surprised me.
And I know our old church in Kansas City, which has 25,000 members on a Sunday, has twice that number on Zoom and television. They also are on television on Sunday mornings. Jim?
Well, in all the discussion, I keep thinking, and you know, I have no way of supporting this or anything like that, but I can't help but believe that an awful lot of this is a function of 24-hour news, number one, and the commercial value of 24-hour news.
Yeah.
It's a big job to fill 24 hours a day with news that is exciting and will get people to be talking about the news and everything. And to talk about Steve's point over there, for the news to go on and say, the United Methodist Church is doing just fine, don't worry about it. Nobody's gonna be really interested in that news as much as the fact that all these churches are breaking away from the United Methodist Church. Now, that's something to talk about. And so this is the kind of stuff that gets put out. And they're always looking for exciting stuff to do.
Jim, that also relates to factual knowledge. It used to be, teachers and stuff were teaching facts because they were stable. Facts change so rapidly now that if you're just filling your brain with facts, it won't be true tomorrow necessarily. So I think there's a tentative hold or grasp of somebody's argument. Yeah, it may be true now, but what about tomorrow?
It's not a fact anymore?
The things that you held true, say in science.
Science does change
Yeah.
over time.
Based on.
Discover new things.
Observations.
Sure. So I'm saying
Let me
there's a
understand.
rollover of information that's very challenging to what may be established in the past, but it's no longer true.
Alrighty then.
And that's one of the reasons people believe in conspiracy theories, because they say science continually changes. Maybe it's not correct on vaccines at the moment. So it's legitimate for us to be skeptical, and it's good for us to be skeptical about things. We should question the veracity. So feeds into the whole thing. We're about out of time. Zoomers, any last comments? Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everybody. This was a good discussion. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.